I thought you were going to bring up the time when we went to Ontario.
Oh, yeah. That was
We did the treaty tour.
Yes. Oh, but we can't talk about what happened to the school van, though. That's a hush-hush thing. But I guess we could bring it up now. It's a funny story. Should we tell the story, Sekwun? Can I tell it?
It's only going to Saskatchewan.
It's only going to Saskatchewan. So anyways, we drive to Ontario. We were driving all day.
Welcome to another episode of RezX,
an Indigenous lifestyle show for your fam.
For everyone.
Hi, my name is Chris Ross.
And I'm Brad Bellergarde.
And I'm Tyler Tootoosis.
And we are your co-hosts. And today we are continuing on with Season 5, which is turning out to be a monster season. As Dr. John Alfred Hammond would say, welcome to Jurassic Park.
But here it's Wascana Park. Here.
Oh, yeah.
Wascana Park. Man, you got that one locked down, Tyler, man. You can tell this guy's like fascinated by dinosaurs.
Oh, yeah. I'm waiting for the contracts.
How come there's no Indigenous people on Jurassic Park?
That's because we're smart.
But have you played Turok?
No.
Turok's a video game, you know? It's a video game where you're an Indigenous person and you like have to hunt dinosaurs and stuff.
For real?
For real, man. It's good. Check it out. It's on N64. Do you know what that is?
I think so, yeah. He must have been Cree.
So we celebrate that stuff, right? We celebrate Indigenous history. Why, Chris?
Well, in my Indigenous history, I listen to a lot of music, right? And I like to thank our sponsor, Death Row Records, for part of that. Death Row Records, thank you very much for the T-shirts as well.
Big up to Uncle Shug.
Uncle Shug holding it down. But
he's got our vote.
Okay. But no, this is all by coincidence, But anyways, but all jokes aside, here in Saskatchewan, the month of June, in case you didn't know, is a National Indigenous History Month. So we're celebrating it here at RezX with a big month of shows planned. Every Sunday, we're going to have like a big show with Indigenous content and special guests like Sekwun Ahenakew from the podcast Spring Spirit. And she'll be stopping by on the show pretty soon here. So please stay tuned for that as well. But Brad, I'm going to ask you to start off the show, kick things off here, because you work with the City of Regina, right?
Yes.
And the City of Regina always play a big role with Indigenous History Month. So can you tell us a little bit about the things they got going on and why is this month so important?
Oh, that's a great question. I do work at the city, but prior to working at the city, I was always involved with Indigenous History Month. National Indigenous Peoples Day, June 21st. It's a pretty significant day because it is the solstice. A lot of events happen on that day. So with the city, I guess it started a long time ago in 2013. It started as an internal thing, and then in 2014, that's when I was actually on RAPA, Regina Aboriginal Professionals Association, and I approached the city to collaborate. We should have a big event, and it just kind of snowballed into a bigger event. So because of the pandemic, we're doing something that's virtual this year. But the goal is to get it back to having in-person, everybody get vaccinated. We have huge celebration. There's nothing like eating an Indian taco in person, not online. I've never tried eating an Indian taco online, but hey.
They can't get the taste right.
Yeah, the taste isn't right. You just don't got the right seasoning on there. But this year we're going to be taking a look at food. That's why I say Indian taco. The theme is going to be revolving around how food brings cultures together. Mm-hmm. And in Regina, we have something called Mosaic. I don't know what you guys have in your territory there, Tyler, but we bring something together that has food where we can experience each other's cultures. So this year we're going to take a look at the timeline, where it started. What was our sustenance before? Mm-hmm. We had dried meat. We had the three sisters. I don't mean Khloe Kardashian and Kim Kardashian and Kourtney Kardashian, guys. I mean the real three sisters, squash, beans, and corn.
Hey, where does tripe fit in all that, though?
That's good. Hey,
Right? You can't forget the tripe, man. Those old guys could chew that forever. They actually sharpen their dentures for this type of
I know exactly what you mean. So that's a great point. We're going to take a look at the different styles of food and pretty much how everything's evolved. I'm Indigenous. I'm First Nation, Nakota, Nehiyaw. I like rap music. That's kind of like contemporary. That's my contemporary culture. It ain't my tradition. But hip hop is what brings people together. So we're going to take a look at how food has evolved. Get fancy, buffalo style Greek ribs.
That's really interesting you say that because, just recently my dad, I think he's going to be like 80, 89, I think, about there now. He was talking about the dietary needs that they had when he was a child. And then you got me thinking about all this traditional food they're talking about. I was like, man, if you thought about it, you could totally go a different direction and go a land-based menu. Eat some porcupine, eat some beaver, eat some gopher, or something like that. I know a lot of people have eaten elk, moose, deer, but there's a lot of things, the smaller games, that we don't even touch or eat anymore.
Exactly.
Right?
That's a great name for like a food delivery place, like Gopher. Ooh. Gopher Eats. I'll go for it. I just thought of that one. I'll pick that out. Write that one down here.
It's a new app.
But I think the big thing about June is just taking a look at the history of how we've, as Indigenous people, have endured so many hardships. We've overcome so many things. Like there's lots of pandemics that have happened throughout existence, I imagine. But for Indigenous people, we've had to overcome different things like tuberculosis. We've had to overcome all the oppression. But one thing we always have kept it's our humor. It's our humor and food.
It makes me think of that meme, that guy standing there when he was about to be hanged, and there's another guy talking, and he looks over and he's like, first time, hey? I don't know. It comes from a movie, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs on Netflix. You got to watch it. That's where that meme comes from.
Oh, yeah.
The guy actually ends up in the noose twice in a row, and I'm just laughing. I was like, oh, my God, because he looks over at a guy that has a noose on his neck, and he's just freaking out. He's like, first time, hey? That's us Indigenous folks with this pandemic. It's like, it's the first one, right?
And I think there's lots of other celebrations. It's as easy as just going online and taking a look. Everybody's on Facebook.
Yeah,
there's lots of events happening. I think the beauty, everybody looks at like how hard things are right now with this pandemic. But you got to look at the other side of it. It's not an obstacle, it's an opportunity to try something new, to go outside of the comfort zone, start programming stuff. Like last year we did a celebration we postponed it to October, and we were able to bring people normally that we would not be able to showcase, like Donnie Parenteau from up north. He's a huge country star, He's like the Mitch of Garth Brooks, that dude. He's huge. He's toured all over with Tim McGraw. He's toured with. And he's huge. We brought in Andrew Menard, who's another heavy hitter when it comes to TV production and just music.
Does she sing too, or is it just
She
film?
sings, yeah. She actually is working on stuff with the Regina Symphony Orchestra. So there's opportunities in this virtual world that we're living in. And one thing that I really think is kind of cool is for kids that we have out there right now, playing games online all the time is normal to them.
Yeah.
For us, it's a little different as an older generation. It's like, man, I hate getting kill-shotted from a little kid who can trash talk.
I really don't have that problem because I don't play games. Actually, the last gaming unit I've had, I've said this before, I'm sure, but it was a PlayStation 1. And after then, I was kind of like, I evolved past games, you could say. Yeah. I seen a path that led me. No, I'm just kidding around. But games are cool. Yeah, games are cool.
Yeah. It's kind of like we're the Bad Batch here, hey?
That I get you.
Yo, you got that one. But yeah, you were talking about virtual stuff. Podcasts are huge this year.
Yeah. The crazy. This is what I loved about our people is that, being in media myself for the longest time, like I just in the last 12 months I've seen just friends and peers just suddenly jump in the media game and start their own podcast and then have followers and have their own shows, and I'm just amazed by that because they just they buy a mic, they buy a laptop, they and then they have hosts, and there's so many Indigenous podcasts are just doing it awesome out there, man. So,
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of ITEP alumni on podcasts, and it's really cool. It's really, really cool seeing them on there. Because a lot of them, they come from an Indigenous educational background, but they have so much more to share. Like upcoming Sekwun Ahenakew that we're going to have. This lady is amazing, has so much knowledge and history of culture and everything. She has more knowledge than anybody I have ever met.
Awesome, dude.
So we're really lucky to have her here
And we
today.
really want to know more podcasts. So if you know of a podcast, a really cool Indigenous podcast out there, shoot us a message. Shoot Mr. Chris Ross a message on all the socials.
Yeah.
Let us know about it. Let us know what the names are. There's some cool names. Like there's this one cool name where it's like 2 Crees in a pod.
Yeah.
That's a deadly.
There's also a Dene one, right? I think his name is, what was his name again? There's a Dene guy up north that's doing a podcast and is really taking off. What is his name? I'll think of his name again. It's going to come to me later on.
Yeah,
but he's
like
really getting big up there as well, too. And it's all in Dene.
It's the new radio.
Yes, it is the new radio.
Remember when your Mushroom or your Tungash would have like a radio playing in the background at your grandparents' house? Podcast on the new radio.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Hey?
And speaking of podcasts, one of the things that I've always wanted to do on the show is do like a crossover thing with another podcast. So we appear on their podcast, they appear on ours, and it's just some crazy inception thing going on. So with that, I'd like to try the first one here. So let's get to it.
Every episode on RezX, we interview a local Indigenous person that has made a huge difference in their community. Today's guest is Sekwun Achak from Ahenakew First Nation, who has her own podcast called Spring Spirit. And she's joining us on Zoom. How are you doing today, Sekwun?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Oh, we're good here. We're just getting everything rolling here. It's a slightly beautiful day here in Regina. How's the weather over there?
Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
It wouldn't be like a Zoom thing without doing that first. Can you hear me? You're like 5 minutes out. Can you hear me? I can hear you. Can you hear me? Turn your mic up. You're on mute.
Flip the battery around.
Is your battery changed?
Yeah, so with that, we have Sekwun Ahenakew here. So Sekwun, why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast and what kind of things you've covered? I know Brad and Chris have taken the opportunity to listen to some. I told them they asked me, I was like, have you listened to any of our podcasts? And I said, to be honest, I haven't, but 80% of the stuff that she shares on her podcast, I heard in the classroom because I was like so blessed to work with this lady in the classroom when I was first a young intern.
Those were the days. It was years ago.
Yeah.
And when Tyler came into class, I just laid down the law, and this is Indigenous education, and we made business.
Yep. Honest to God, I'm just straight up humble right there for the rest of my life.
These are our children.
So, Sekwun, why don't we share with some of the viewers we got on, and Brad and Chris, what you talk about on your podcast? And I'm sure they have questions too.
So on my website, I just, it's an Indigenous podcast that combines elaborate Neheo sound production with thematic shows ranging from Indigenous knowledge to res journalism. And it's kind of like the hashtag Kiam Life, hashtag Indigenous podcast. You'll see me in different social media platforms with those hashtags. And my episodes are just, highlighting Indigenous people and the unique things that they're doing out in Turtle Island.
That's quite the intro. Brad or Chris, do you have any questions?
Hey, thanks for joining us here. My name is Brad Bellergarde, and I was listening to your podcast, and I thought what I found was really cool was you had a connection. You're actually showcasing Indigenous stories and Indigenous storytellers and perspectives. And as far as Hawaii, now that really hooked me because I see a lot of similarities and differences. What sparked your interest in wanting to reach out to somebody from Hawaii?
Well, I took an Indigenous land-based class out in Hawaii with Dr. Alex Wilson. And from there, we met many people in Hawaii, and they taught us so many different things from a unique perspective that is a Hawaiian perspective. And from there, I met Chris, and I just thought, man, I have to get this guy on a podcast. I just have to. He's so knowledgeable in terms of land-based education. And what's really unique about that is that their land-based education involves the water. And what is parallel to us, it's the land and cosmology as well.
So when we take a look at that, then I know around here we say water is life. Mini le wichoni le wakan. It's holy. Water is holy for us, and I think one parallel that we see here when I was listening to it was the humility side of it and the respect for the land. Can you tell me a little bit something that when you were doing your podcast, was there one piece of information that Chris said there that was like a wow moment for you?
Well, when he said that, when I asked him basically, what is land-based education to you as a Hawaiian? And he said that education is or the land is a platform. And from there are so many things that you can draw from it. And that was a wow thing, because when you think of the land as a platform, like sky's the limit. Like when I thought of that, I thought, if you're an Indigenous writer writing a play, you can create just about anything, and it's limitless in that sense.
Very cool. Chris?
Yeah. Well, what I love about, first of all, your podcast is that I'm interested in the story behind the media of why you decided to start a podcast. Was it something big that due to the pandemic, and what made you get into Indigenous media like this and wanting to do a podcast like Spring Spirit?
Well, several years ago, I was a part of IOPS Empowers Women, and IOPS stands for Indigenous Opportunities, and that's with Nathan Arias from the Red Pheasant First Nation. And he put a call out for women who are interested in showcasing Indigenous women and their stories. And we did that for about 2 years, and we received a One Woman Award for that work. And then I went into hiatus for a bit. And when the pandemic hit, I thought, well, what can Sekwun do? What can I do to bridge any gap that there would be, as a result of the pandemic and people just feeling cut off? So I sat down and I created Spring Spirit Podcast. And my name is Sekwun Achak, by the way, and that's Cree for Spring Spirit.
No, that's really cool. You know what I thought was really awesome was there was just like the fluidity of the language I was listening to the podcast with Barry Ahenakew, and he's talking about long ago and the old ones, how things would be when he's talking about the Great Lakes. And so what role does language play in your podcast? Like, how important is that to you to be able to bring a podcast that showcases our identity through language?
Well, this is kind of interesting. I'm going to pull in a little bit of history that Tyler knows. I used to play this online game called Clash of Kings, and from there I met so many people. Yes, I had a castle, and I was a princess, and no, I'm kidding. I've met so many people around the world that were engaged, and we talked about everything as people from Europe, Mexico, United States, like everywhere, you name it. Chicago, yeah, Dark Alpha Wolf. I remember you. And from there, they just wanted to know so much more about who I was and my people, and so that's sort of what catapulted everything.
Like, well, what are some new ideas? Well, don't let the cat out of the bag, I guess you would say. But what's next? Like, what are some other ideas of shows that you want to have, different characters or guests on your show for the future? What would you like to see happen in a perfect world? You say it happens. What would you like to see next?
So going back to Clash of Kings, I'm not promoting them, but this is where the idea came from. You know, they wanted to know the language. There were even people that were changing their names to Cree names, and then from there they were actually studying the language. And now I have them reaching out to me and encouraging me to get more Indigenous people speaking the language, singing the language, so that they can access it via podcasts from their home countries. So as a result, now I have high demand for Barry, who is my dad, to come and speak more. And I had someone reach out to me from Texas wanting to know more about women's teachings and teachings for girls. So without letting more out of the bag, that's what's coming up.
Very cool. How can people find your podcast?
My website is springspiritpodcast.ca. You can listen to me on seven podcast platforms, and I am on most social media platforms.
Even MySpace? And High Five?
Sorry.
Bebo?
And Bebo?
Real old.
You know, real old.
I was on Bebo.
See, that's it.
But I'll share something with you guys about this unique woman here. She's just literally scratching the surface of what she knows. There's so much more. Like, it's like, you're like so surprised by something she'll share with you, and then she can amaze you the very next day. Like, we've had so many great adventures together. When we were working together, when I was an intern with her, we got an opportunity to travel to Muscatcheese, and we sat for a very long time. The man we went and seen was last name Saddleback, and we sat there and we listened to stories from when we got there late in the afternoon till about 2 at night, and this guy could have kept going on and on and on with these stories, and these stories kept us all captivated. Me and Sekwun, I think we had another driver too at that time, and all the children were all captivated at that time. And this is some of the stuff that she uses in her podcast and in her teachings, and I'm pretty sure education prepared her for a role in podcasts, because when you're in education, you learn how to present and public speak, and you have such a different variety of audiences in schools with different grades and teachers, EAs, school guests that come in, and everybody observes you, and they also critique you. So that's why Sekwun is such a profound speaker. It's really amazing when she really gets into talking.
I thought you were going to bring up the time when we went to Ontario.
Oh yeah, that was
We did the treaty tour.
Yes. Oh, but we can't talk about what happened to the school van, though. That's a hush-hush thing. But I guess we could bring it up
what
now.
happened to this.
It's a funny story. Should we tell the story, Sekwun? Can I tell it?
It's only going to Saskatchewan.
It's only going to Saskatchewan. So anyways, we drive to Ontario. We were driving all day. Sekwun was managing the kingdom, and I drove for a long period of time, and finally we were almost an hour away from our destination, Northern Ontario. We pull into a gas station in one of the towns there, and by that time I was already getting tired. And you know the metal pillars on the sides of the gas cans or gas tanks?
Yeah.
I cut the corner too sharp, and all of a sudden we were driving, we just heard that grinding metal. And it was at that point, if you back up or move forward, we were still grinding. So like, oh man, we just got to go for it. So we turned and we gassed up, and we're looking at their red paint on a white van. It was just all on the side. She's like, Tyler, what are we going to do? And I'm like, instant, I was like, we got to go to Walmart. And then she says, okay, then we go to Walmart, and then we buy those Mr. Clean Magic erasers, and me and the kids were out there just scrubbing. I was like, I'll buy you guys a pop, I'll buy you whatever we want, but we got to get this war paint off.
Totally had our backs. Yeah.
So that was some of the adventures. That was actually the best trip ever, too. Oh my God, it was so much fun. The community treated us like gold. Like, talk about traditional values. We get there, they just threw us right into everything that was going on in the community. They had boat rides at the lake, airplanes taking us off on the water. They had fish fried every day. It was so good. It was such a unique experience.
The chief was serving them food he had just cooked.
Oh,
that was
yeah,
amazing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Where is this, in Northern Ontario?
Where was it, Sekwun?
Oh goodness, Jennifer
something-
Manitowopi was
Plays
the
Platte?
director of
Not Plays
education.
Platte, eh?
Oh, man.
Nope. We were north. We were close to Whitefish Bay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That was a wicked drive, too. Adventures, I tell you. Road warriors.
Well, we do want to give an extra thank you for taking some time today to talk about your podcast and give us something to look forward to here, because we know that the best way to stay connected is to be connected. And if we can utilize the land to connect all of us, I think that's the best way. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we let you go here regarding your podcast? Just reach out to anything about it, anything about anything.
Yeah, this is Sekwun Achak from Spring Spirit Nation. I'm very glad to be on this platform with RezX magazine and the amazing hosts. And I hope to see more of you. Log into my website at springspiritpodcast.ca or check me out on Facebook.
Awesome. Thank you,
Awesome.
Chris.
Yeah. Well, thanks for doing this, and and if you want us to be on your show, just let us know, and we'll do this next time.
He's saying he wants to be on your show.
We'll even send you a Death Row T-shirt.
Yeah. Don't ask us how this happened. Like, Brad just was wearing his death row, and I said, I'll bring mine. And then it's like, and I'll bring one for Tyler. And so
We got to reclaim the land through the streets, I guess.
Honestly, Sekwun, Chris has some really good fabric softener happening here.
that's my natural smell, by the way. It's not fabric softener.
Well, yeah, once again,
Thanks,
thanks.
guys.
It was great talking to you, and I look forward to hearing more of your episodes. If you guys want to take a look at what type of guests she has on her episodes, feel free to hit up her website, and it's on Spotify. That's where I listened. But we'll be back here with a new segment. We're going to take a look at some pandemic news. So,
Pandemic news coming up.
pandemic news.
Dun, 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 dun.
Thank you, Sekwun. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.
Yes.
Moistas kakyo.
Oh, kakya no agwanganak.
So this past year and couple months since the pandemic began, there has been no shortage of crazy news stories, from murder hornets to killer mosquitoes. Okay, that didn't happen, but it could have. There's no shortage of crazy things that have happened, right? So we have a new segment we like to call Pandemic News Stories, right? But this one is Indigenous edition, okay? But
Got it.
but here, just to quickly talk about it, what I want to do is just to start off with this segment by asking all of you, how have you been dealing with a pandemic? And Tyler, I'll go to you first.
Okay. Well, what I've been doing and dealing with the pandemic and what's been happening is I've been teaching online and in the classroom. So it's literally you have to get everybody's attention in life and yet also in the virtual world. It's a lot tiring, but I find it gratifying because it's actually giving us a chance to develop and use new skills, because a lot of times we never would think about using media, cameras, Google Classroom. There's all kinds of cool tricks on there, like all kinds of cool tricks. One cool trick that I can share quickly, because I have a short amount of time, is I used to sit there and click each individual student and mute them when they wouldn't quit talking, right? And that kills time. Later on, towards the end of the year, there's one button that you can push that mutes them all. It's like, I am a forgiving God, but silence. That's what I got to share. There's so much more things that you can share about kids and teaching online. Yep, but I'll throw it on to the next guy. I can't talk forever.
I'm using it right now. Sorry, Brad.
That's a good segue. Like, I think one thing that I'm really impressed with is, in my role, one day-to-day job, I have to deal with knowledge keepers. I have to talk with community members, and a lot of the times our knowledge keepers are just phone, like landline phone conversations. I'm starting to see elders and knowledge keepers utilizing Zoom, WebEx, all these different platforms, learning how to use an iPod or an iPad and a computer, and I think that's kind of cool. It's kind of bringing that generational gap together. It's like it's someplace, somewhere where people can connect.
I want to thank you both for tuning in here. I'd like to once again thank our sponsor for Indigenous Day, Death Row Records.
RezX.
Death Row Records, RezX. So they're not a real sponsor.
No, they're not. We're not sponsored.
But
We don't know
if
anybody
they
from
could,
Death Row.
that'd be awesome. So with that, thanks for tuning in, and join us next week, keeping with more National Indigenous History Month shows on the way. So thanks very much for tuning in. I'm Chris.
I'm Brad.
And I'm Tyler Tootoosis.